forward with that topic there. And we'll then move on to the Public Works section here. So we have, and let me just pause
with
for
that topic.
Let me pause for a quick second here because Rick Brown, we have some guests here, right, that are here for a specific topic. I think we should just go to that one first, or you think we'll be able to get through the waste topic and then have them come?
I think we can, I think the waste connections, we could probably get that fairly quickly, but Chair, if it's your desire, the committees wants to put deer management first, we can certainly promote those folks and handle that first. Depending on the kind of questions that we get as it relates to waste connections, maybe your suggestion is a good one to see if the committee is agreeable to moving deer management up first.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If it looks like everyone, well, let me ask it the other way. Does anyone object if we do deer first and then we'll do waste connection second? All right, seeing no objections, then we'll change the order here to be able to do that. And if it's okay, if I could just ask for a motion in a second, just that we change the order of the agenda. So Councilmember Edens with the motion, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. Then the motion again is to change the order of the agenda so that we will address the deer management topic, and then we will come back to waste connections and the remainder of the topics. So all those in favor of that motion say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? Okay, so therefore we'll then move into the topic of the deer management, and there is a memorandum included there. That was an ask that was made by the committee to ask the city administrator and Director Brown to gather information from other cities and relay that to us. And that is what is in the memorandum here, what these other cities have shared back. So we have this information available to us. In addition, the committee had requested that we have an invitation to representatives from White Buffalo. So I believe they are on here as well, Director Brown.
I've got it. So
Okay, thanks.
that's okay. I'm going to promote Jason Boulanger. I guess that's how you pronounce it. So I'm going to bring him on, and then Tony DeNicola. So if you'll give me a moment, let me promote both of those folks to panelist. All right, let me get Tony. Okay, so I think both Jason and Tony are on the call. Jason, good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Rick. Good to see you again, Steve. Thanks for the invite.
Welcome again, Jason and Tony here to our Admin Public Works Committee. City Administrator Cross, just maybe you didn't hear me before, but let's add Dr. Rambo here because I know he's here for this specific topic.
Certainly. Let me go ahead and promote him as well. Give me just a moment.
Traveling from what an update I think I just saw before. So
okay,
maybe only by audio or not, but all right. So Jason and Tony, thank you for joining us here. If you could, we would like to have an opportunity for the committee to learn better about the services that you offer. Obviously, introduce yourselves and what you've done, the kind of work. The committee probably will have some questions for you so that we can hopefully narrow down our approach and direction here.
Certainly, I'll just start out.
Watching.
This is Jay here. And so I'm a wildlife biologist and I'm with White Buffalo. I'm the current president of our nonprofit, and I've been here for a couple of years, coming from academia, where I served as a tenured professor of large mammal ecology and management at the University of North Dakota. And because I'm somewhat green, although I've been talking with Rick and Steve and Rob, I'm going to turn things over to Tony, who is the CEO of White Buffalo and who founded the company back in 1996, who is better served to be able to speak to folks. And I'll jump in when possible. And I see Tony's on, but without video.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
As
Yes,
Jane
thank
mentioned,
you.
I appreciate the invite. My cellular bandwidth here is limited, so I don't want to have breakups with running video. As Jay mentioned, I started the organization back in the mid-1990s, following extensive research on white-tailed deer prior to that. And I visited your good neighbor Town and Country back in 1998 when they were first contemplating deer management. And it took them 10 years to make a decision. So spent a lot of time in your region and obviously started the program in Town and Country. And at this stage of my career, I'm starting to wind down with direct field operations, but obviously have the most intimate knowledge in our methodologies, history, background on how deer management can be implemented in various environments. I've run numerous archery hunts, shotgun hunts, trained law enforcement agencies, worked internationally. So if there's anything I can't answer, then I'd be happy to find those answers. But I feel as though I've got the breadth of information to help you make your decision. But at this point, my understanding is you're really at a crossroads of politics and economics. But we're happy to help with any technical questions that you have.
Thank you, Tony, for that. So just a clarifying question here. Did you say you started working at Town and Country? You mentioned 98 was when they were starting to discuss it, but it took them 10 years. Did you start in 2008 at Town and Country?
We would have started in Town and Country. I think our first phase there was a combination of sterilization, surgical sterilization, in 2009, mixed with a subsequent sharpshooting project. And then after 2 years of that combined effort, they realized, given the development pattern in the community, it was far more cost effective just to continue with sharpshooting methods to control their local population.
Got it. So is that continuing through today, that program there, or how
Yeah.
long has it been going for?
Yes, sir. We've been there every year since then.
Okay, and that's what, since 2011?
2000, we started shooting 2000, would have been 2010 with the shooting. And every year since, they want to keep their population below 40 deer per square mile.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that clarifying question. That's all. That's what I had so far. So let me open it up to the committee members with your questions. This again is our opportunity to learn as much as we can from Tony and Jay regarding White Buffalo. So I see Councilmember Bertolino, you've got your hand up. You want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. To Tony and or Jason, I assume you both have looked at the data and the demographics of and the topography of our city. What are our chances of getting our deer population down to a reasonable and livable amount?
So first, you as a community and the community leadership decide what is a livable density, right? And that's hard to know until you've experienced it. Your data right now, you're ranging anywhere from 60 to nearly 100 deer per square mile, which is, from our standards where we've worked historically, you're on the higher end of the spectrum. And so there's really been no environment we've worked where we cannot achieve your desired densities. Your challenge is you're over 60 square miles. So realistically, you're going to need to prioritize areas of concern, whether that's residential complaints, whether that's deer vehicle collisions, whether that's ecological impacts. And you're probably going to want to prioritize how you allocate your resources to meet your respective objectives. So I would suggest you already have some archery hunting in the more, we'll call it rural western portion of your community. I would strongly advocate continuing archery as well as firearm where possible to have the greatest impact in those less developed environments. And then, think about where our resources and expertise would give you the most return on your investment. And we're not here to advise you on how much you should spend or what your specific objectives are. Just we can help you get there and also let you know what will work and what won't. And that's kind of been our biggest I think strengths is I've done extensive sterilization research on deer, and I've run our hunting programs. We published on the feasibility of reaching various densities with varying methods. So we can help you get to that point, but you collectively need to determine where you want to get to, and then we can guide you on that process.
Thank you.
Dave, you have any more follow-up questions?
No, thank you. That's good, Joe.
All right. Councilmember Edens, I'll let you go, but I know Councilmember Clark, you had some questions by email. I apologize. I don't think I've really got a chance to review it in detail, but do you want to ask those questions after Edens?
Yeah, I will wait till all the questions are done, just in case others have these same questions.
All right, Councilmember Edens, you're up.
Yes, thanks for coming here tonight. I think from our previous discussion as a committee, and unfortunately I wasn't able to make last month's discussion, but what was clear to me from reading Dr. Rambo's report and from previous attempts in our city and neighboring communities is that the managed hunts that are already occurring at parks and the local archery community isn't enough to take care of the problem. And this is a problem that requires additional expertise, manpower, and money allocated to do so over a period of time. And that's what my residents have asked for as well. So I think don't get a lot of complaints about too many issues, but this is a frequent thing that residents talk to me about. And so I feel very strongly that at least from Ward 2 is residents understand the need for a third party to be brought in and for dollars to go towards this issue. So I feel very comfortable with that. So my thought would be is really where we need help is as a community is determining what that livable population looks like that we can stand in terms of deer per acre, and about how to start this process and in how many years that we want to dedicate into getting it into a manageable population. And so I do think that Dr. Rambo's suggestion of starting with a test area in the city makes a lot of sense. And I personally, I would like, some feedback and some guidance on that. And I understand that that you're not here to help tell us how much to spend, but I do think we do need the help in starting the process, especially with you guys in picking an area, looking at what the changes are, communicating that to our residents, and expanding it over a multi-year period.
Tony, Jay, you want to respond to that?
Well, I think Councilwoman Edens is, she's got an understanding of probably the most strategic way to move forward, which would be to evaluate a program in a portion of your community. You can determine amongst yourselves how to prioritize that initiative. You can state this is kind of an iterative process. So if we start out and you want to get to 40 deer per square mile, what we found over the years is if you can get to that 40 deer per square mile mark, most residents are reasonably happy. You have to see how that blends with your deer vehicle collisions, right? So if you reduce an area or two areas in town to 40 deer per square mile, see how your residents respond, right? You see lessened number of complaints, and then what are your deer vehicle collisions in those respective areas compared to areas that have not been actively managed. And then the next year you go, okay, we're doing pretty good. Maybe we expand at this density. Maybe we have some parks that are particularly of concern from an ecological perspective, and we would want to maybe push densities down to 20 deer per square mile in those areas where the plant ecology is a priority and not so much landscape plantings or homeowner complaints and deer vehicle collision. So we can kind of evolve the process and the conversation over time, where you can kind of piecemeal your efforts in a way that are the most cost effective means to achieve your objective. So I think it is a long game. From the first year, it's really economics. There's never been a safety issue associated with these. There's not going to be complaints from your landowners unless they're more animal friendly, we'll call it. And so it's really, how much of a part of your landscape do you want to impact initially to see some immediate results, or how much do you want to, kind of phase this in over a longer time period based on, I hear you're talking about, I don't know, sewer connections, right? So you obviously have a lot of other problems in town and impacts on your budget. So you're going to just need to kind of balance this as one of many topics that you deal with as a community.
May I ask a follow-up, Chair?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, could one of you elaborate on that kill sharpshooting process? And the reason I ask is because I'm not a hunter myself, but there are hunters in the family, and I need to be able to accurately communicate that. I understand that you guys have a wonderful accuracy, and my understanding is that this is a much more humane way than having somebody that may be more amateur not have an effective kill shot, and the deer limps around for a while, maybe becomes infected. So can you kind of explain that process, not just for me, but really for any residents that might be listening?
Certainly, and we often will do a community visit. If the community wants to move forward with the program, we can come into an open public meeting and answer questions directly from the residents, so you're not getting it secondhand. So that's clearly an option.
Okay.
So for us, and I won't take a lot of time, but I started my PhD back in 1991. And back then I needed to kill deer in order to reduce a population due to competition around my research. And I had archery equipment. So I've been an archery hunter since I was 16 years old. And I killed over 400 deer with my archery tackle for part of my research project. But you soon realize that it's pretty darn primitive equipment, even though archery tackles has advanced in its technologies. When you transition to a rifle, it affords you the ability to shoot an animal in the center of the brain. And so I am on the AVMA, which is the American Veterinary Medical Association depopulation panel, as one of their experts on how you euthanize, which is a technical term of good death under field conditions. And so I bring that expertise to that professional community that is used to euthanizing animals in a controlled setting, in a lab, in a slaughterhouse, in a vet clinic. And so that's what my efforts in the field on culling animals professionally ran the gamut from early archery equipment to more advanced rifles that we can shoot an animal in the center of the brain. They are killed instantaneously. And so from a humanist perspective, nothing compares. And then from a efficiency perspective, nothing compares, because if you're a non-hunter, it's hard for you to visualize, but if you shoot a deer with archery tackle, it's going to run, right? And when it runs, the other deer run, and you elicit this flight response, and they learn that that was a bad experience, whether it's the property, whether it's a tree stand, whether it's human smell. And so as we publish, you'll see that as you reduce the deer density, the deer get smart, and they learn to evade the properties that are being hunted. They learn to evade those methodologies. Whereas when you use a center fire rifle, you can euthanize the first animal, and I call it creates confusion, because you euthanize the mature female when she does not run as if she were shot with an arrow or just spooked in general. The other animals are confused because they're used to following her away from the threatening situation. And so then you can literally, if I have 6 or 8 deer that come into a select location where we bait, I can euthanize all those animals in well less than a minute. So we don't create this educational response where those deer over year after year learn to avoid our methods, learn to avoid properties. And ultimately what happens is you go right back to where you started, except you have a population of what I call smart deer, right? They're no longer standing, watching you rake your leaves, or shovel your snow. When they see people, they're going to scatter, but there's still a lot of them there getting hit by cars, eating landscape plantings, and impacting your flora and your forests.
Wow, thank you so much for explaining that a little bit more. I think, we have a responsibility when we make population call decisions to not let an animal suffer. And certainly if I can eat a burger and be okay with an execution method in the slaughterhouse, I can be, in my mind, okay with this similar method if it means that I'm helping the population, right? That was a very good explanation that helps me reconcile the fact that I can cry during Bambi and also know that I need to make this change in my community. So thank you. That's all I have, Chair Garitano.
Thanks. Next up, I see Councilmember Jaxie and then Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jason and Tony, for coming out tonight. I only have one question really, and that relates to dollars and cents. At some point, we are going to start talking dollars and cents. In the deer management report that Dr. Rambo gave us, he approximated it at approximately $500 per animal. But he very clearly spelled out that there would be some variance in there. We've had some engagement with some of the local communities about, services being rendered. And some of those dollar figures that were shared seem a little bit higher. So can you talk to us a little bit about the dollars and cents of this?
All right. So historically, we've always offered either a turnkey package or, like in Town and Country, we work with their folks in Public Works who handle the baiting for us in advance. They handle site preparations. They'll handle carcass transport. And so our costs are simply number of person hours and our expenses, right? And then how many deer are donated to food pantries at the end of the program. And so our expected rate of production, we'll call it, would generate a cost of $400 to $500 a deer. Particularly, a lot of that comes down to, do you have a lot of cooperative landowners? Right? We can't just have a few landowners and expect to impact the whole ward or district, right? You have to, we're under the assumption that people are looking forward to mitigating this problem and they would volunteer their properties. And if we have good property access, then that price range is very realistic. And then it can be reduced if there is local support for some of those, I hate to use the word menial, but less critical phases, but are still very time consuming, going out every day, baiting 20 or 30 locations, transporting carcasses. So anything you take off of our plate, you just see the time and materials that we incur during our program.
Okay, thank you very much.
And maybe if I could do a follow-up just on that topic there. Tony, do you typically put a proposal together when you start to get into that serious conversation with the municipality about, getting into a contract? Would you be putting together that proposal that spells out then what you guys can offer and at what cost and such?
Yeah, you would have all those details broken down. And if you got to that phase, I would definitely, the reason I'm on the call is my right-hand man, Ryan, who's been with me for 24 years, is on vacation. He's from Indiana. So I would send him out. He would look at properties. He would lay the whole program out. We would, coordinate on what local support we would have, what the property access would be. Then we can give you a very accurate breakdown on what it would take within a select area to reduce to a density that you would define.
Got it. Okay, that's good to know because, I think some assumptions that you might be able to make with cities, like for us, we don't have the kind of staffing, we're very small. from a city staff perspective. So our Department of Public Works, we don't have trucks or, well, I mean, we do have a few, but it's not like your typical city that does that kind of work. We outsource it all. So that's probably where we would have to have those conversations to figure out then what you do, and then, if anything is done by the city here. Okay. Then I see two more hands up, Councilmember Clark and Farmer.
I am going to let Councilmember Farmer go ahead because my battery is dying and I'm gonna have to switch over.
All right, we're gonna do a switch. So Council Farmer, you're up.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys. So I represent one of the, if not maybe the most residential ward that we have. So I'm just trying to think through how the process would work with some pretty tightly packed houses. I imagine we would need to maybe get some different homeowners associations involved or something on common grounds. How do managed hunts work in tight quarters?
So for us, we can operate on an acre without any problem and still be highly effective. The challenge is visibility, right? You don't want to be working on Mrs. Smith's property and Mr. Jones next door is doing his dishes in the evening and he's watching deer get shot on the neighbor's property, right? That doesn't go over well. So the reason you'd want to bring more landowners together is to ensure that there is consensus amongst those, we'll call it affected landowners, out of courtesy, right? And so we'd want to have bigger blocks or homeowner association parcels integrated. But we work in very, very tight quarters. We would change to 22 rimfire firearms, which are lower energy, lower report, very quiet, and still as humane as our other firearms. And we would use those in those very tight neighborhoods.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Councilmember Clark, you ready to go still?
I think she's
you.
still
I'm back.
other shoes are.
Here I am. I understand that, we find our target and then work backwards from that stepwise to make a plan, so that we know where we're going instead of just going out there and hitting a spot here or there. But my question is, we have all these cities around us that are having the same problem, as well as the Franklin County that's on the other side of us. And if we take care of our deer population, the deer don't know the boundaries of the city. So there's going to be some crossover. Is there any way that St. Louis County and possibly even Franklin County, we could all get together with our adjacent cities and just have some kind of workshop, and maybe White Buffalo could help with a workshop to give us all at the same time this proposal, so that we can take care of it, and we at least we can know that around us we're not going to be inundated with more families of deer from other areas because they haven't taken care of theirs also. Just an idea. I thought maybe it would be cost effective as well to do it as a group instead of each city individually. And I'm not sure we can do that, but that was something I had thought about.
You want to, Councilmember Clark, maybe you want to have him address that one topic before you go to the next one. Sounds like that's a question of whether, it's more productive to collaborate with other cities if they're willing and interested, trying to tackle the issue as a whole ecosystem here versus just us alone. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
And I apologize. I don't remember if you have wards or districts as political delineations in your community.
We have we have 8 wards.
Wards. So you can very easily manage your deer effectively within a ward and not touch deer in other wards, because deer are what we call philopatric, meaning that they reside where they're born primarily. So they don't move randomly through the landscape. We've worked on areas 1 or 2 square miles and can manage deer in those areas without having any deer management proximate. So the regional approach, although it would be great from a deer management perspective in the St. Louis greater metro area, from your perspective, it has no benefit. And if you've tried to do anything with multi-community initiatives, you'll be working at that 20 years from now and still be talking about it.
Councilmember Clark, you want to follow up with the rest of your questions? Did we lose?
Oh, I just had one comment to make on the memo that Mr. Frost put out, that I think it's good that we know what's going on in the other cities and what has worked for them, but without a measurement, without some kind of predominantly common test method that was used to measure this, I don't see that we can determine whether or not they were successful in any of these. Maybe they had some test method to determine whether or not they were successful, but I don't see it in the memo. That's all.
And if I could comment on that observation.
Sure, go ahead.
And that's one of the things that we run into. And for example, in Town and Country, and as you have done, you have collected good data using your law enforcement personnel to estimate deer densities. And that's critical in order to have a truly objective means of determining that in your deer vehicle collisions and homeowner complaints to really measure your program. And to your point, we see a lot of archery programs in particular that are successful, but nobody ever quantifies deer vehicle collisions or population changes. You just make some people happy by killing some deer in their property, and it satisfies those complainees. And so in order to really monitor your program, we would strongly advocate that you maintain your population estimate methodology, and that you also continue to monitor your deer vehicle collisions throughout your community so that you do have a means of actually looking at whether you're getting return on your investment. And we would never want to, for us, to go in and shoot, say, 200 deer in your whole community, it would be a waste of time, right? Because your community is so big, it would be a drop in the bucket. But if you shot 200 deer in a specific ward, then you would see a lot of benefit in that location. So for us, it's not about just killing deer. And we would, us, as a professionals, I won't go in a community and operate unless there's going to be a meaningful impact. It's just a waste of my time. You don't want to kill deer for no reason, and then the community's wasting money that really gets them no benefit that they're going to see long term.
All right, thanks for that, Tony. I got a couple, just maybe some questions, or at least maybe what you've said, just trying to repeat to make sure I understand correctly. So from what I've heard, it sounds like what Councilmember Clark asked about earlier, that, you could work in a specific area, let's say a ward of our city, and that would be productive if you worked in that area. You'd see a measurable improvement in that area because the deer typically stay within their home area. Well, that sounds good to me, because I think too, from my fellow council members, at least the way I'm thinking about this, is that, as we go into this, it's like almost like a test and learn, right? We're going to go in, we're going to try it out. Let's see how it works. And then we can expand, the program if it, continues to move in the right direction and we're getting good positive feedback. That's the way I'm looking at it, like just, kind of taking it by piece. Very early on, Tony, you mentioned that you work with other cities and they kind of do a hybrid. It sounds like they do both archery and firearm. We've only at this point right now, kind of focused and zeroed in on White Buffalo with the firearm. Are you, back to your comment before, do you recommend that we look at doing a combination approach when we figure out this program?
I certainly would try to ramp up any hunting initiatives that you can in the western portion of your community. All of that is beneficial. What we've observed, as well as others, if you look up, as an example, I always give this so it doesn't look like we're biased. If you look up Fox Chapel, Pennsylvania, deer management, you'll see they started with archery hunting and realized that it was not meeting their objectives. And then they started sharpshooting with their police department. And they continue that program to this day. And they've been doing that well over a decade. And when we started in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, same thing. We managed the bow hunt. And what was interesting is we were managing mostly law enforcement officers. And they swore that they were going to manage this deer population and that we would not, or not necessarily we, additional lethal methods would not be needed. Well, this is where the program is today. They would kill about 30 deer. We would come after 4 months of hunting, kill twice as many deer, and have to do that each year. And now those same police officers are now sharpshooting the deer in the community. So, and I've seen this process over and over where the hunters think they could manage it until they're actually in the field and they realize how difficult it is. And it's not so much, I'm better than you. It's, I have a rifle, you have a bow and arrow, right? It's that fundamental of an issue. And so it's, I don't like the us versus them, but they can be complementary. The only time they're not complementary, without confounding this, is if bow hunters are hunting over bait. So if the hunters can recreationally hunt and shoot deer over a pile of corn, they will make deer smart. So when we come in after, now those deer are going to learn to avoid those locations and they're going to be super nervous. But if bow hunters are in your more densely developed neighborhoods and they're just what we call shooting opportunistically, if they come onto the property that they have permission, that will have no effect. And it doesn't hurt, right? If they kill an extra 10 or 20 or 30 deer, you're not paying for the processing of those carcasses, right? It keeps the hunters enthused and engaged. And then we can follow up and actually meet the objectives that you've stated.
Okay, so that sounds like that there's a complementary approach there with the two, and we could work through that. One of the comments that Councilmember Farmer made earlier is, and in case you're not as familiar with our city, we are the third largest when it comes to area in the state, 68 square miles. So obviously that works against us. But what's also very interesting too about our city is that you kind of have a line where it's like there's Highway 109 that runs from north to south, and west of it, you become really more rural. It's more open spaces, larger parcels of land. East of that, it's more of your denser subdivisions, neighborhoods. So I'm guessing that we would have to have an approach tailored to kind of each part of our city, because as Councilmember Farmer said, a subdivision, those homes are, close to each other. And I think too, our laws, our, regulations may prohibit us if we don't have the appropriate land area to even allow hunting to take place. So I think that's a question probably for, John Young to opine on, right? Because I think we'd have to follow our own laws as well. The cost per deer, I know you mentioned that earlier. That's something we would have to wait to hear from you more. Like if we decide to move forward, you put together a proposal of what that cost is going to be like. My next question is, I think we're really dependent on property owners basically giving permission to have you guys come into the property, right? So how does that work when you work with other cities? Is there some kind of agreement, legal document that the property owner provides permission, and how the liability is handled? Could you tell me like what you do in other cities?
Right, so we usually use either public works, law enforcement, and or council folks to know their neighbors, right? And know the people that they serve and who would be amenable to having a management program on their property. And then we would then visit with those individuals if they were interested and have a sit down, explain just like I did previously on how the process unfolds, what would happen on their property, when it would happen. There would be a landowner agreement, which also includes an indemnification section so that they are not liable for our actions on their properties. And we have probably 3 different tiers of the of those forms, because we have some landowners that are we'll call it a little more well off and have a few more lawyers associated with their life. And so I have some indemnification forms that are nearly 10 pages long. So whatever the landowner's comfortable with, whether that's corporate, whether that's private, to ensure that, they don't feel as though they're exposing themselves for the benefit of their community, beyond what they feel comfortable with.
And would you look for us to have like a minimum, let's say, number or minimum, acres of land committed before we move forward with this? Like, I mean, I want to make sure that we've got everything teed up, right, ready to go, so that when you come in, it's like we've got already, X number of property owners signed up and ready to go. It's not like you come in and then all of a sudden we're knocking on doors and only maybe 2 decide to do it. Is that, you look for that kind of commitment first?
Yeah, that's critical. And what we typically will do, we do an early site visit, and then we would probably put a grid over a ward, for example. If you designated a ward that you wanted to move forward with initially, we'll put a grid, because as I mentioned, with the phylopatry of deer, you can't have 10 properties all in 1/4 of the ward. They have to be balanced throughout. So we want to be able to have those points of access evenly distributed, where literally you can shoot the ward in the southern quarter and you won't have any impact on the other half of that ward. You won't even touch those deer. So that's where it's very important to look at not only the number of properties, but the distribution.
Got it. All right, just one more question for you. This has been really helpful. Do you work in only a certain period of time of the year to do this, or are you doing it all year round? I'm just trying to figure out how that would fit into our schedule. And then obviously we'd have to budget for this. We don't have anything budgeted that I know of right now for 2022. So is this like a spring thing all year round, winter thing? What do you guys do?
For your latitude, we call it bait leverage. When are the deer hungry, really? And then obviously you're not going to shoot deer in the summer when they have fawns that are dependent on them. So typically in Missouri, you can start in December and probably work, depending on how the winter works for you. If you have a bad winter, we could probably make it to mid-March. If it's a real mild winter, you guys get honeysuckle starts to blossom. All your flowers are coming up. Now the deer say, to heck with this pile of corn, and our efficiency drops. So ideally it would be December through February would give you your best rate of efficiency.
Okay, got it. So so if we were budgeting this for 2023, we could have the funds in January, let's say. Would that work? Would that potentially work, or are you guys already scheduled for this coming year? I'm just trying to figure out how we look at this.
So we would have, as of now, we would have probably late January and February open. And if there was conversations where I would send someone like Ryan out, he would meet with your staff, he would meet with some landowners, they would start creating a plan and a budget, then clearly we would leave a window of operation open. We now have a pretty extensive staff, so we have some more flexibility. It used to be me and 2 biologists for 20 years. So now we've got a pretty extensive team, including veterinarians. So it gives us a lot more latitude on being able to provide the service throughout the winter.
All right. And I just have one last question, but let me just see. Does anybody have anything else that maybe they thought of, or you heard something that you want to ask about? Jaxie, did you raise your hand just now?
I did, Joe, but I was just ready to make a motion. But if you had more questions.
No, I think I got all the answers here. I guess my question, maybe Tony, is if the committee, like so far, everything they've heard, I'm thinking that it might make sense for then next step is that you come out or somebody from your organization come out and look, do the site visit so you can put actual proposal that we can react to do that. I mean, I'm guessing people are interested in moving forward, but you know, it sounds like we probably need that proposal really to do anything tangible moving forward.
Yeah, so if you vote amongst yourselves at some point to pursue developing a plan, I can definitely have Ryan come out and meet with whoever you allocate to oversee the operations, and they can start getting all those details together. And if you want to have that coincide, I don't know how frequently you have open public meetings associated with council, but that's often helpful. So your public doesn't feel as though something sneaky's going on, right? You get it out in front of them, people can come in, everyone can voice their, because you're gonna have, when you talk deer management, literally everyone has an opinion. So it's good to let them voice their concerns, have their questions, we can answer those directly, and then get some of that political angst out of the way, and then we can move forward with the more formal aspects of coordinating the logistics.
Okay. Tracy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, he actually started to answer my question as I pressed my hand. That was my question, is how, you either hear one side or the other. They want to feed the deer or not. I just wondered what experiences you have seen other areas have, and will you guide us in any way, which you kind of started to, of ways we can get ahead of that so that we don't get, the downside of it.
Right, and so to Councilwoman Eden's point, she's getting a lot of feedback on concerned residents in her ward, and I don't know if there's the conversation starts and all of a sudden she's going to get 10 people giving her an earful that we love the deer and don't you dare touch them. So it's also helpful when this gets out and of course the animal friendly people, and I've been sued by them literally 7 times. When they get involved, right, they're going to be very much more outspoken than those that want deer managed. People that want deer managed are like, let's just get this done, right? People against it are really, they're going to, wear Bambi suits possibly in front of the town hall. They're going to send you a bunch of hate emails. But you want them to be able to voice themselves, right? If you don't let them vent and have an opportunity to speak at a public forum, you're going to see a lot more potential and prolonged, we'll call it aggravation for yourselves politically. So be upfront, explain what you're trying to do, what your objectives are, how this will be done. We can answer their questions directly in person. It's not necessarily going to placate everyone, but you just explain, what the objectives are, that you're looking at deer vehicle collision concerns, which is usually the best way to, and probably the most pressing issue for y'all is just your public safety. Because it's hard for people to, it's much more subjective when you're talking about, protecting your landscape plants versus killing a deer, right? It gets a little more defendable, if you want to call it, if you're looking at plant ecology, right, and your forest health. But obviously the most robust defense of a program is really trying to mitigate the public health risk associated with the sheer number of deer vehicle collisions you experience. So wherever we can help you politically, logistically, budget projections. I mean, literally, I've done this for 27 years, so it's all I do.
Thank you. Rob, do you have a question?
Yeah, just real quickly. Thank you to White Buffalo for coming. I think this was helpful for everybody. I have a list of input that I'm not going to go into. I think I'll just make some bullet points for next time. But I do want to mention that, as was just brought up, the deer vehicle collisions are sort of our first order public safety concern, followed closely in my mind, having spent 10 grand on it this year alone. Tick-borne and deer-borne diseases are also important. And then the ecological impacts are the most near and dear to my heart, but it's hard to get people, residents, a lot of residents excited about those. There would be more excitement about protecting petunias and hostas and those kinds of things. But I think what I really wanted to mention was that we need to decide on at some point whether we want to have a pilot program in one of the lower density, lower human population density wards, lower deer population density wards, get our feet wet, or whether we want to go into someplace closer to town center that might be a little tougher, but will cause immediate effect. And complicating that a little bit is the fact that out by me, Highway 100 is highway speeds. And as are the north and south ends of Highway 109. And so in the center, town center, we're a little bit slower. We've got some traffic rounds.
Rob, what's the question for Tony?
Oh, I had no question. I was just kind of providing some input.
Oh, okay.
So-
I just want to make sure we're going through questions here for our guest here. So hang on to that for a second, because we may already be going down that path, what you're bringing up.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Lauren, do you have any other follow-up question for?
Well, I was under the impression Councilmember Jaxie wanted to make a motion, which I highly suspect. I'd love to second. And then I do have a comment more than a question for Mr. DeNicola, which I hope I'm saying correctly afterwards. That would
Okay.
also pertain to the motion.
So yeah, Rob, what kind of motion do you want to make? Because that's what I'm curious as to, like, what do we send in the council? Like, just that we want to do this, or do we want to have the actual proposal to council that they approve?
Well, I was going to move basically that we move forward with White Buffalo and request that they bring, I think that he mentioned the name Ryan in to do the, to help us move forward with that process.
Yeah, I think
The
that's
one
the
thing
way-
I'm hesitant on, Joe, and I was just toying with, was the idea of maybe saying, let's take our two most severe areas. Dr. Rambo's report gave us a breakdown of 6 areas. And if that's more palatable to say, okay, well, let's take 2 areas and do a trial run. But I don't know if we need to get that specific yet.
I don't think so. I think your motion would probably be best to say, and hopefully that captures the spirit of the committee here, is motion that we move forward with the next steps in the process with White Buffalo, which would be the development of the proposal. Because without the proposal, I mean, we can approve all day long. We're just not going to get anywhere. We're not doing anything until we approve actually a contractor or something. So I think the proposal will answer whatever questions we don't have clear answers yet on, like the costs and such. But I
Agreed.
think that would make sense. And, I don't know what you all think on this committee here, but I think we just probably have to get to that point before we can send it to the council, because if we send it to the council, they've got nothing to approve. So that's what I'm thinking. Just try to get that next step in.
Okay, agreed.
Lauren, are you good with that? Lauren's got 2 fingers up. That's a
Yes,
second.
I would like to second, and can I go ahead and make my comments now
Yes.
on the motion? No, I do agree that we have to get something more concrete to pass along to council, because I think it's just going to create a lot more questions from the public if we don't. I'm not sure what travel dates look like, but I know that it was brought up how often we meet. We meet once a month. It's usually the first Tuesday of the month in admin and public works. So we could maybe, if it works out, make progress for next month, if not the following. And then it sounds like it'd be appropriate to maybe move it to council, and somewhere in that process have an open house where people can ask White Buffalo questions and refine the process. The other thing is, I'll let the experts decide kind of where to start, but I do want to throw out, not because it's shamelessly self-serving representing Ward 2, but because it might be somewhat practical. Wards 1 and 6 are the 2 rural areas of the city. And then mine's the only ward that is a mixture of urban and non-urban. And so you might find that we might be an easy target because we've got lots of parcels that are over 10 acres apiece, and then lots of parcels that are really on, you know, a quarter of an acre. So it would give you interesting results. You would certainly know how that's affects maybe a more urban area. And I would imagine that you might have some folks that are in my, you know, quote unquote suburban areas that are more amenable because they are next to those parcels of large acres and have lots of deer to combining their lots and signing an access agreement for you. I can think of several families right away. So I do want to throw that out there. And then my other comment was just for Mr. DeNicola, kind of regarding the conversation, because one of the things you said was it the pro animal or pro welfare? I can't remember the exact phrase you use, but I would almost argue that to call them maybe anti-euthanasia individuals, because it implies that what you're doing is anti-animal welfare, and I would disagree with that strongly, because it is a humane way to manage population. And otherwise, we have a very unhealthy population that looks rather sickly, and I really don't want chronic wasting disease to end up taking over here. So I think any way that we can frame the conversation as maybe anti-euthanasia or not, or is better than anti-animal welfare or pro-animal welfare, because I just don't think that's accurate. I think you give yourself some more credit.
Just for clarity, we have a memorandum of understanding with the HSUS. We work closely with other animal welfare organizations. So they support what we do because it is more humane than archery hunting. But yes, I call it, it's truly animal rights, where in their mind, we as humans do not have the right to make the decision to euthanize the animal. So that's the faction will, if they exist in your community, will present themselves. Those that are animal welfare will still find it difficult, but they recognize the need, they recognize the professionalism and the amount of effort you've put forth contemplating this, continuing to contemplate this strategically to ensure that the population is managed appropriately and you see the outcomes that you desire. So it's just that very small vocal group that will show up at your meeting, and you just recognize it, and you may know them already. They may already feed deer year round and already kind of telegraph their kind of affinity for deer, and those folks are the ones that you'll catch an earful from.
Well put, thank you.
And I think too, like, again, there's a lot of work ahead of us here. Like, we'll have an opportunity to get input from people so that, they're being heard. And there was mention in the past about either scheduling a public hearing. We have scheduled open houses here at City Hall where people can come and learn about the approach, and they can ask questions, provide their feedback. So I think there will be some good opportunities ahead. So again, we've got the motion on the floor. I'm not sensing any so far objection here. Councilmember Rambo, do you have a comment now?
Yes, I really did. What I was trying to do, I apologize if it was out of order, but I was trying to put a finer point on the motion itself, because as Ms. Eden said, we do have to make some decisions based on, we have to guide White Buffalo, I think, more than we currently have. Do we want to go for a lower density human population area with lots of green space? We want to go to for the maximum effect in terms of deer vehicle collisions and so forth. And so those are decisions that the committee can quite easily make, and it might help White Buffalo sort of tailor their approach, but we can leave those to later. The only real thing that I still need to throw out on the table is that the hope in the report that I put together, the draft, is was always to try to use local archery hunters for maintenance of populations, particularly in the western areas and places where it's feasible. I don't think it's wise to expand, to combine 1 acre lots in areas where there will be lots of people that are anti-euthanasia, because they will certainly be anti-archery hunting to an even greater extent. So there's some decisions that I think the committee can make. I'm going to back out and watch you make them. Thank you.
All right. I think we've had a lot of good discussion here. We do have the motion on the floor here to move to the next step, which would be to have White Buffalo arrange a visit to get to see, understand our city, what challenges we have, and be able to put that proposal together so that we can react to that and then take it from there. Anything else that anyone has? Otherwise, with the motion on the floor, all right, seeing no other questions, hands raised, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, that motion passes. So Mr. DiNicolatoni and Jay, thank you so much for joining us here. We will then have to work out the details of, our next step here. And so get to have you or who you had mentioned would come out to do the evaluation and see what our needs will be.
Very good. Thank you all for your time and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Much appreciated.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Rambo, I think you were hanging out for that topic here, right? Or do you are you hanging out for anything else?
No, I'm actually trying to drive to Chicago. I just really was interested in the presentation. And again, I'm sorry for being out of line.
No,
I didn't realize.
you were fine. I knew you were driving. I thought we would see you in the middle of a cornfield off of I-55.
No. I'm still at my house. I'm jumping in the truck here shortly. So thanks a lot, guys. Have a great evening.
Travel safe. Watch
I
out
will.
for those deer now.
I always do.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. All right. Moving on then. We'll get to our next topic, which is going to be the Waste Connections topic. And there is a memorandum that was attached there. So hopefully you did get a chance to take a look at that. But this was put here because of just ongoing concerns that have been coming into City Hall regarding the service. And I know in the past, we've had some inconsistent experiences across the city. Some have none, some have them still, some have them sporadically, but it still continues to be an issue. And our city administrator and director of public works want to bring this to our attention here. So, city administrator, do you want to say anything else about this topic with Waste Connections?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm going to have some opening comments, and then Mr. Brown, he and his team are the ones that put together the schedule that was part of your package. But Rick and I really felt it important, at least to make sure that this committee is aware of what we here at City Hall are dealing with. You all see it kind of from periphery, where you might see through the neighborhood where there wasn't a pickup, or you get, some calls from residents or emails from residents, that they missed here and they missed there, they missed a couple of weeks. And so you see it in your ward. Rick and I see it in 8 wards, and we see it literally on a daily basis. And you see that in the counts. You can see the number of resident complaints at 176, and that's just through July. And last year it was 120 for the entire year and 54 before that. So a little bit of history with Waste Connections. When they came in, they made a great presentation. We all were very much enamored with them. And Eric Bergen was the general manager here at the local office and was doing a great job and moved heaven and earth to make sure that Waste Connections served the city of Wildwood. Unfortunately, they made a wholesale management change and Eric was gone. Then they brought in a gentleman named Rob, and Rob was here for less than a year. and he was the antithesis to Eric, and didn't move a paperclip, much less heaven and earth, to get things done for Wildwood. They moved him out, and then they brought in a new manager. Rick and I met with him, and the team that was brought in, they made all kinds of promises, which were immediately not followed through upon. And I can tell you that Rick and I have been dealing with them daily in phone calls and emails, threats, and it's falling on deaf ears. So there's a problem. The last email that I got from Waste Connections, which was in response to an email that I said that they needed to serve our residents well, was met with excuses. We understand that there are issues going on in the world today that didn't exist maybe a year ago. We know that there are supply chain issues, and we know that there's some staffing issues. We get that. And I mean, we as a city want to be cognizant of that. But by the same token, we're paying, our residents are paying a good price to these folks to provide a service, and to get excuses and just say, well, it is what it is. And you guys are being unreasonable, meaning the city of Wildwood, whereas all the other cities they claim are not, which is not true, because I talked to Councilman Harder, who Waste Connections serves half of unincorporated St. Louis County. They're having problems. As you all know, Eureka is having problems with them. So there's an issue there that doesn't seem to be getting any better. And in fact, this schedule, the performance standards, which ends up, being that they owe us money per the contract, failure to meet performance standards, that John Young has drafted when we were going to go down this road before, but you're talking $16,500. And so when I suggested to their general manager, he basically said, this is all covered under force majeure, and that they have no responsibility to us by the penalties. Mr. Young takes exception to that, because a pandemic and anything is not a force majeure issue, but that's for Mr. Young to opine on. Bottom line is, Rick and I are just bringing to you all's attention that there are issues. There are points in the contract when the parties have to give notice to each other if they are going to make a change. So now might not be the time to go out to market to say Republic, and that's pretty much who all our municipalities around us use, and Republic gets high marks. It may not be necessarily the time right now to go out and try to go out for bid because of staffing issues, because of unavailability of trucks or parts and so forth. But it might be something that, unless this committee or the city as a whole sees a significant change, you might want to think about it. I don't know. There's a lot of areas that in the city of Wildwood that say we don't have any problems, and there's other areas that have problems continuously. So this is just to bring to your attention, and we have some numbers here to support what Rick and I and Michelle deal with daily, literally daily. To give you an example, they're allowed in the contract, I think four misses per month. I think that's the standard. We get that 4 misses a day, the way it's been running now. So anyway, just I wanted to lead with that. Rick can talk about the schedule and the performance standards, and these are the ones that they're tracking. There's a whole lot here that's not included, and this is going to be a further discussion between Rick and John Young and myself in terms of there's about 5 other standards that are in the contract they're supposed to be following that we need to get them to follow. They're not providing reports. They're supposed to be providing reports to the city about complaints and so forth. They haven't done that since September of last year, and they're supposed to be doing that on a monthly basis. So they are failing the city of Wildwood on many fronts. But so anyway, Rick, do you want to, with the chair's permission, Chair Garitano, if it's okay, then maybe Rick can talk about the schedules then.
Absolutely. Yep.
Sure. Well, I was going to mention one thing just to remind everyone, if you're not familiar, we've been with Waste Connections since August 1st of 2019. So we are entering our 4th of 5 years of that original agreement. So if we were to make a change, it's not too far from being something we'd want to think about. And not saying that I'm advocating for that at this point, but it does take some months to go through that process. Last time when we went through the change, we put the RFP on the street in February, and it was a little rushed, frankly, to get that done and have them in place by August 1st. So I guess that's what I'm trying to emphasize to you. It does take some time if we were to think about changing ships, to go through that RFP process and to get them to get a new agreement with someone else on board. So maybe I spoke out of turn there, Steve, I don't know, but I just wanted to mention that. As far as the memo goes, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I did provide the resident complaints that we have logged per month. That's something we did provide for the predecessor Meridian to this committee sometime before we made the change in 2019. So we are continuing to track that. And it's, Steve referenced the number of complaints. It's written so that they are not supposed to have any more than 4 complaints to City Hall for any month. Otherwise, we can penalize them for any complaint beyond that over a month. So that's the magic number 4 for complaints. So the complaints have been well in excess of that, generally speaking, over the last 6 months, say, or more. So the performance standards are listed in the same or the following table in the memorandum. The main ones we're listing there are the complaints, also missed collections and cleanliness. We get, I think most of the complaints we get are obviously relative to missed collections. And then we do have an occasion here and there, we have a truck that might be leaking fluid, making a mess. And when we hear about those things, we do our best to report them to Waste Connections so they will clean up those areas as quickly as possible. But if they don't perform, they don't respond, we can find them. So I guess I'll end with that. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to help address them.
Thanks, Rick. And maybe what might be helpful, only because I have some memories from when we had the prior vendor. Could you just share, like, when these complaints are coming in, these are people contacting, I'm assuming, City Hall directly. But I know in the past, I think Michelle was the one that handled those calls and talked with people and then turns around and escalates them to the waste provider. How much of that now is occupying her time? Like, are we losing productivity because she's too focused on dealing with complaints versus time that she could be spending doing stuff for our citizens?
Well, I think, yes, that's true. When the complaints are in excess of 4 a month, it becomes a significant part of her job. And when they're upwards of, we've seen over the last 6 to 9 months, it's definitely a big part of her job. And she's on the front line and she gets frustrated and doesn't like to get the calls and try to deal with them. But, and I don't like to hear them either. None of us like to get them, frankly. It does become a significant part of her time, and it's very frustrating.
And I might add to the committee that this listing of resident complaints, these are the complaints that we are aware of that come through City Hall.
Yep.
This schedule does not recognize, because again, Waste Connections has failed to provide us the reports that are identified in the agreement that they are to give us on a monthly basis in terms of what complaints they get, how they were resolved, when they were resolved. So we don't have, those numbers are not reflected in here for the people that are going directly to Waste Connections. That's an important number.
Got it. So it's basically only what we can see and hear that we're aware of. All right, Councilmember Rick, Steve, are you got everything that you had to say, or you want to open up for questions?
I think questions would be appropriate. Yes, sir.
Okay, Councilmember Edens.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. City Administrator Cross just said what I was going to say, which is by the time it gets to City Council, those are only the people frustrated enough to do that because they've already contacted Waste Connections directly, and they even know that there's council members or staff to complain to, which, to be fair, a lot of people don't. So the problem has to be way worse than what we're seeing. I guess my question is, so can they just, if we would impose financial penalties, can they get real snippy and just threaten to cut service and pay whatever financial penalty that would be with trying to terminate a contract early, and we'd have to, go through some sort of court process, but in that time, could they just refuse to pick people up? And then if so, is there some sort of emergency way that we could speed up an RFP process or not even have to do one if we know there's only one viable provider and our residents are left with nothing as an emergency? I mean, could that happen?
Well, I'm going to give a short answer, but then I think the more appropriate answer would come from John Young.
Okay.
But there are dates in the agreement in which either party can give notice to cancel, to not renew. And so, as you all may remember, yesterday, literally August 1 was the start of the new renewal period. And I guess this is either the third one. I think it's the fourth one. Okay. So we were 2-year contract with then, 3 or 4 1-year renewals. So the renewal just started yesterday, August 1st. Now, in the contract, Waste Connections is required to give the city 180-day notice if they want to terminate or not renew the contract. The city has 90 days to give notice if we want to get out of the contract. Now, again, I'm going to ask, with the chair's permission, ask Mr. Young to come on and say, well, can they just say, well, we're not going to pick up anymore? I think that's a question that John should answer.
If you're asking me, can they just decide, we're not going to serve at the city anymore? Well, they can do that, but they've posted a bond guaranteeing that they would perform that work. And if they fail to perform the work, we will call upon the bond to pay someone else to do it.
Okay, so that makes, I realize that they can't by contract, but they're already not honoring certain clauses in the contract anyway. So I guess my point is, what's to say they just won't honor one more contract and give way less than 180 days notice and leave us in the lurch? So even though it may not be the time to bid, I would just be prepared for 2 weeks notice or something just really drastic just in case, I guess. Is what I'm worried about.
I think just on that, just like you have hypothetically, you had a contract with somebody coming to do work in your house, right? And they just decide, I don't want to deal with you anymore. Whether they terminate according to the contract or if they terminate and violate the way the termination language is. And again, I'm not a lawyer. They could do that. There's a huge amount of reputational damage that they would face because, to do that, a lot of other cities and the county would be watching and then, thinking, well, that could be us next. So I do think that, maybe you raise a good point, Councilmember Edens, that, maybe it's not a bad idea to have a contingency or backup plan. And maybe that's part of us just doing research as to who else is out there. What can they provide? Because right now, time is on our side. Yes, it's not great, but we know there are issues that have to be addressed. And very likely, maybe this is the message too that may straighten them out a bit. Just a thought, but go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chair. With your permission, Councilmember Edens, you raised a really good point. I would really like this committee to understand, Rick and I are not advocating to make a change. That a change is painful. And believe me, we get it. It's painful on the staff. It's painful on the residents. It's painful on the council. It was not easy when we changed from Meridian to Waste Connections. It was a godsend that Waste Connections came in and did what they did, but man, that wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to negotiate them picking up the totes, and all that kind of stuff. The last thing that we're advocating is to, screw things up for our residents, because there's a big chunk of the city that say, hey, we don't have a problem. We're happy. Everything's fine. And so, we walk a fine line here. If you remember, it wasn't that long ago. It was in January that Waste Connections, kind of demanded. Remember, if you all remember, we had to make changes to the contract. We had to agree to price increases. We had to agree to not getting our rebate for cardboard. They basically put a gun to our head. And you all, and the council agreed to that because they had us over a barrel. I mean, we didn't have time to go out and find a replacement. So it's a tough thing to do. So we don't take this lightly, but I mean, at some point in time though, they need to step up. We can have them come before council, and you all can, do what, call them on the carpet or what, but right now they're not performing the way they should be performing for the city of Wildwood, at least in our opinion. And I think you all would agree. I think at least from your individual wards, some of you are, I mean, my gosh, Rick and I get emails from Joe Garitano like almost daily. About what's going on in his. I don't know what's happening in Ward 8, but I don't know what, but I just want you to know we're not taking this lightly. We're just bringing it to your attention. We're not making a recommendation because we'll do whatever the committee and you guys want us to do. But if you feel that maybe it's time to kind of test the waters and go out and have some conversations, we can do that.
Well, Joe, maybe Lauren, I think you're done, right? Or
Yeah, I was just going to say I understood exactly what you meant, City Administrator Cross, about what you were recommending and what you weren't. I'm just worried. I have a trust issue now with them because of the previous experience. And so if they're already not following the contract, are they really going to follow the renewal process the way they should? And so I just wanted to float that out there that we could end up, just totally hosed. But having money that they've, essentially bonded was a good reminder, and I appreciate Attorney Young's comments.
Well, that is a good thing, but I will say that this management group right now is pushing back a lot harder than any of the previous management from the time we brought them in is. I mean, everybody else was working with us. This management group is pushing back hard.
well, and Joe, hopefully, if you don't mind me just commenting on that. I mean, I would like, we partner with this company for them to provide a service to our citizens. I want a partner that wants to work with us and someone who is cooperative, and certainly like the actions that City Administrator Cross just mentioned earlier in the year, that was very disappointing. I mean, that to me was trying to take advantage of a situation there, and it hasn't set a good tone for me going forward. And so I'd rather have something in my back pocket now, whether we decide we want to do it. I think it puts us in a position of power because then we have maybe somebody else we can go to if we really have to. And right now, if we don't, then we're helpless. We're just sitting out here thinking like that's the only one we've got. So Joe, you're up.
If I'm sorry, I'm going to just jump in real quick and just make one comment because I failed to mention this. Rick and I have a meeting with Waste Connections tomorrow, and I'd forgotten to mention that. They are bringing the new general manager out. We have communicated by email, but we've not actually met this gentleman. When they changed the management, they came out with the people that were in place at the time. So literally tomorrow at 1:30, we're going to be meeting the new general manager. And we're going to see what he has to say. This will be our first face-to-face meeting with him, and we'll see how much he shows us that he wants our business. Because his emails have not necessarily been that way. I'm sorry to jump in.
Okay. Yep. Joe, you want to go?
Yeah. So, I mean, I will say, at least around me, generally speaking, I don't know that there's too many people that are being missed too much. I mean, there's a few times I'll get a notice on the app where they didn't, like, I don't know that they got the recycling today, but they said they would be back out tomorrow. So I guess my question is, with the data that we do have, which is certainly better than none at all, is it the same people or the same places that are constantly having these recurrent problems, or is it sort of scattershot all over the place? Because, part of this could just be that whoever they have managing this program right now has a bad truck or a bad couple trucks, because I can certainly notice around me, there are definitely times when a different truck comes through and then there is trash and stuff all over the roads. Some of the drivers do pick it up, some of the drivers don't. So from the data that you guys have, is this the same people or places that are complaining, or is this like scattershot all over the place?
Rick, you and Michelle put all the there's a huge detailed spreadsheet behind this summary here. Rick, how would you answer that question?
I think it's spread out throughout the city. I think a large part, one of the things that I notice, it seems they don't have enough trained, well-trained drivers. And so they will frequently put somebody behind the wheel that is not familiar with Wildwood. And that really manifests itself when they get in some of the trickier rural areas and they may get lost. Essentially, they don't know the route. So they'll miss somebody, miss their subdivision or whatnot, but it can happen anywhere, frankly. That's my opinion.
Okay,
And that goes to the staffing issue where they're not getting drivers. And so as Rick just said, they're just getting warm bodies and those folks are not trained the way the folks were when Waste Connections first started in the city. And it's problematic.
all right. Well, then I guess I would say this because like Chairman Garitano, the January or whatever that was sort of extortion meeting that we had also rubbed me the wrong way. So I don't know if you guys need a motion to get some other options on the table so we can at least understand what we're looking at. But I would suggest that when you do that, now we have the data points available to speak exactly to the problems that we're going to have, which is we have rural areas of town that are difficult to navigate and manage. And we understand that, but that's part of the deal. And I would maybe even ask these guys at this meeting tomorrow to have them give us their solution tomorrow to the problem that they should know exists. If they don't know that problem exists, that is even more ammunition, I think, on our end to perhaps look in a different direction, because, management changes at any company are difficult and, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but, if they're all over the place and they're not able to communicate what the fix is going to be, I'm certainly not an attorney either, but, the fact that they can't hire people doesn't change the contract. So they're going to owe us some money somewhere for sure. I mean, that's just how it works. So, if you guys need a motion to go get other options, I am happy to make it.
Yes, if this committee, if it's the desire of this committee for Rick and I to start that process, we can circle back. We had a conversation with Republic. But if if you're asking us to kind of go out and test the waters, we're happy to do that. So, and yes, I would like a motion and a second, to authorize us to do that. If you all don't mind. I will also offer this. If one of you on the committee, I don't want the whole committee there, but if someone else would like to sit in tomorrow's meeting with Rick and I'm okay with that. Just have another set of eyes and ears, talking with these folks. So if one of you would like to sit in with Rick and I and provide some additional input or a set of ears, that'd be fine.
What time is that meeting? I might be able to.
That meeting is at 1:30 tomorrow. Yes, 1:30 to,
Yeah, I could offer to do that.
Okay. Well, it'll be Linda and this new gentleman who we've not met. So, Linda, obviously. So, if you'd like to do that, and representing this committee, that'd be great.
If the committee's fine with me being there on their behalf, I'm happy to do it.
Well, Rick said he didn't want it, but I'm going to override him and say it's okay. Just joking.
I was going to say you should bring them out to the next meeting so they can talk to you guys directly, but this might be a better first step.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think ultimately that management group needs to be talking to this committee and explaining how they're going to improve, for sure.
And yeah, we can report back, how that goes. Lauren, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, Councilmember Garitano, thank you for volunteering to represent the committee. I appreciate it. I do have one thing that I request that you remind them of, though. So, and this might be helpful background for the rest of the committee too, but Joe was already on council, and then when I started in 2019, old council had already approved this contract, but again, they hadn't started work yet. And there was a push by one council member in particular, or a couple of them, to get them to start before their contract date because the previous provider was doing such a bad job. And Waste Connections, and this was Linda and the other manager that's no longer there, went up to the podium and said, we don't want to do that because we are not comfortable putting drivers that don't know the routes and aren't trained on ahead of time. It will give us a bad start. We'll get complaints.
Yeah.
We're just not ready to go. And that used to be their philosophy. So I know they can do it. They just probably got rid of the people in place because they either created an environment where they didn't want to work for them, or they got what they paid for and went with the cheaper option and laid somebody off. But they did have a good training program, and that means they can go back to it because somebody knew it before. And they didn't let those drivers on the road, and when they rolled out, there were 0 complaints.
Yeah, no, you're right. And there are changes that happen. Like if you go back to the old Meridian, the Meridian when, what's his name? Chuck, I can't remember his last name. He was the owner of the very first Meridian. That was a well-run operation, but that kind of changed quietly, like overnight. You know, it's like all of a sudden you knew things were starting to fall apart in the system, and actually that just continued to decline. But it certainly, yeah, it's been a kind of a night and day difference because, you know, the Waste Connections that we started with was dramatically great, you know, compared to the Meridian we were leaving. And then, yeah, something happened, and it may be a combination of factors. So maybe we'll find out more tomorrow, and hopefully maybe they can get the message that they need to start improving, or we're going to be taking some steps to see what our options are.
But please pass along those comments. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, does the committee then still want to make the motion that we just kind of begin some exploratory work, that we kind of just see what's out there, because that always takes months to get going, you know, and that's what ends up happening is the issues start happening, then we're forced to renew within a month or two, and we just don't have the time to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, I'm still happy to make it.
Okay, so Joe, you're going to make the motion. Is there a second? By Councilmember Hopper. Any other questions or comments on that? All right, then all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, anyone oppose or abstain? All right, that passes. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 3 under for action, the contractor bids for landscaping around 100, 109. Steve and Rick.
That'll be Rick.
All right, I'll take this one. Thank you, Chair Garitano. So tonight we have for you a contractor, well, 2 contractor bids to do landscaping in 4 separate areas or 4 separate projects.
Rick, I'm sorry, Chair, Rick, if I can interrupt. Should proposed street name change be the next item?
You see, I apologize if I overlooked that. Hang on a second here.
I think that is correct, yes.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. I went too far down. All right, so we'll do the proposed street name change request. That's item number 2. Guess that is Rick as well.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Chair Garitano. Committee members, the item number 2 for tonight, or 3 actually, is the proposed street name change. This was originally presented to you at your July meeting. This pertains to a petition that was received from the residents on Old Slave Road. They have asked and submitted a petition to change the name of that street to Madison Valley. Old Slave Road is in Ward 1. It's located just off of Wild Horse Creek Road, not too far from Centaur Road. So if you recall from the July meeting, I brought this to you and referenced the code where it requires a review potentially by Historic Preservation Commission. That review did occur last week. They had their meeting, I believe it was Friday morning, and Joe Vunich presented the request to change the name to the Historic Preservation Commission, and he provided the name change to Madison Valley to them, and after discussing it internally, they did ultimately approve the recommendation to change the name from Old Slave to Madison Valley. So with that information provided through the Historic Preservation Commission, I have provided that recommendation. If you'd like to read it, it is attached to the memorandum. So with that recommendation, I am bringing it back to you tonight as a formal recommendation from the Department of Public Works to the committee to recommend changing Old Slave Road, the name, to Madison Valley. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for any questions. If the recommendation is approved by the committee, we would need to prepare an ordinance to affect that change for the city council to consider. And I'll address any questions you may have.
All right, any questions for Rick or Teresa? I see your hand up. Is that for a question or for a motion?
It is for a motion.
Okay, well, you can get the motion on the floor then. So Councilmember Clark, you've got, you're making a motion based on the recommendation as noted in the report.
I have a comment to make before the motion. My only concern with changing the name of the Old State Road was that there were 2 opposed in 2013. And I was told that at least one of those families was a Black family. We're all white on this committee, of course, and the families living on Old Slave Road now are non-Black. The majority of my immediate family is Black. So I have an exaggerated sensitivity regarding this issue. I contact my nephew, who is the chief of police in Lansing, Michigan, and ask him for his perspective, perspective for this change. And he strongly urged me to speak with both white and Black leaders in the St. Louis area to understand any of the problems that might arise from this. My nephew knows some of our leaders, and he suggested that I talk with our own Colonel Gregory or Lieutenant Colonel Doyle of the St. Louis County Police Department. And I did. Colonel Gregory is a Black man, and so is Lieutenant Colonel Doyle. Colonel Gregory told me that he pointed out that the murder of George Floyd has exacerbated social issues, and such as systemic racism, and even in smaller non-urban areas, museums and pictures and statues have been broken down in order to remove remnants of the negative history, although it can never be erased, of course. And at the same time, to open the eyes of people who don't understand the impact of this history. As a Black man, Colonel Gregory stated that the Old Slave Road would be offensive to him. This is a serious issue and must be addressed with sensitivity, transparency, and compassion. It's not simply changing the name on a street sign. This change is one that can remove a stigma that carries, that can carry within our city. Slavery is, of course, ugly stain on history, and it's up to us to do our best to move Wildwood government forward in the right direction. And with that said, with all that said, I move to approve the name change from Old Slave Road to Madison Valley, and to erect a historic marker that defines who Elijah Madison was, to be located in an appropriate location along that road.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? I see Councilmember Nyan, your hand up went first on my screen. So we have the motion on the floor. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Berlino.
Yeah, just a reminder that, when this issue came up a few years ago, there is a Black community that is not in Wildwood per se, but it's close by. And I apologize for not coming up with the name. I know we just celebrated with a proclamation the 100-year anniversary of their church. And that group, and I forget, again, I apologize for the not knowing the pastor's name and so on, but that group of Black citizens were adamant that we not change the name Old Slave Road. And their rationale at the time was the legacy of that plantation, of the 200 and some slaves that lived there, of the slave cemetery that still exists along that road. I think that the idea of naming it Madison Valley and putting up a plaque is honorable. I think that sounds good. But I really think before we go forward, I would really like to see the city administrator or Rick or someone, or even the Historic Preservation Society or Commission, talk to that church and those members to get their input, because I would feel very badly if we got this through and then they showed up at one of our meetings and said, "Didn't you hear us, several years ago? Weren't we plain about what our concerns were?" I really would hate to have us miss that step.
Okay.
We will do that, Councilmember Berlino.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, thank you. And then let us know the feedback on that. So at this time, we've got the motion for the street name change, but also included in that motion is the plaque that honors and recognizes the history of the road there and Elijah Madison. So any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Anyone
Did you have
opposed?
a second on that, Chair Garitano?
Yeah, Councilmember Nyan, I believe, was the second on that. Mhm. She did agree. She did nod yes. So again, just let's make sure we get that vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, anyone oppose or abstain? All right, the motion passes, and then we'll have any information that's learned by the next time. Again, this will go to council. So we'll be good to get that input and feedback. All right, then we have another item on the agenda, which is the contractor bids for landscaping off Route 109. So I believe Rick Brown is going to talk about that.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Garitano, committee members. I began speaking to you about this a short while ago. So we have for you tonight bids from 2 contractors to install beautification plantings in 4 different areas of the city. And so we have 4 different projects listed. And first one is what I refer to as Project 1, is a improvement that has been in front of this committee previously. It would install primarily shrubs, native grasses in the medians of Route 100 at the intersections with Mueller Road and at Wild Horse Creek Road. So that was project number 1. Project number 2 and number 3 are new to the committee. And I think the thought, and Steve may want to jump in here on those 2, is to try to provide some landscaping along the Wildwood Greenway, but also improve or provide screening between either Route 109 or Route 100 and the adjacent neighborhoods. So we have typically landscaped the Wildwood Greenway as we've constructed it. In regards to Route 109, that location, we installed the trail with improvements to Route 109, the roundabouts that went in more recently in the area south of Route 100. We did not include any landscaping in that original project. So essentially this would make up for that failure at that time. We would add some landscaping trees to help beautify the trail in that area, also to provide a screening to some of the homes in Main Street Crossing subdivision on the east side of 109. I jumped ahead a little bit there. Project number 2 is relative to Route 100. On the north side, between Route 100 and Taylor Road, we have the Wildwood Greenway that runs through that area. And of course, we have the new homes that have been constructed in the villages at Brightleaf. So the landscaping there primarily would be intended to provide a screening between Route 100 and the villages at Brightleaf subdivision. It would be installed in various locations between Taylor Road and Route 100. So that project would include 163 new trees. The improvements contemplated under Project 3 along Route 109 include 95 new trees in that location. So again, the idea would be to provide a screening between the highway and the adjacent subdivisions. And I'm sure, as many of you know, we do get complaints from residents on a fairly frequent basis, complaining about the highways and the noise that comes along with it. So this would go a long ways, I think, to helping alleviate some of those concerns and to say the city is trying to do things to help in that regard. And even if you argue that there won't be a huge improvement relative to the noise, psychologically providing that visual barrier is very important and does provide a significant impact to residents. So that's why these are being presented to you tonight. Project number 4 is essentially a replanting project that would affect the medians of 109 and the roundabouts on 109. And the intent there is to try to replant shrubs that have died since the original plantings went in on that project. Over several years, we've lost a few shrubs here and there, and we wanted to replace the ones we've lost. And we wanted to add to some of those as well. We're adding a few trees that we never did originally plant, but we wanted to plant. So the Route 109 work is more related to ongoing maintenance, and that would come out of our landscaping budget for that work. So as I referenced, we did open bids last week on Wednesday. We got bids from 2 contractors, Canoyer Brothers, and then Ideal Landscape with the 2 bidders. I provided that information to you in the bids. We also included requested from those contractors bids to provide waterings in addition or subsequent to the original planting of those areas. So the recommendation from the department to the committee is to move forward with a city contractor agreement with Canoyer Brothers. And that would plant all 4 project areas, projects 1, 2, 3, and 4. We would do that work this fall, assuming this is approved by the committee and the city council. The cost to plant all 4 projects is $247,663. And I would point out to you that when we package this up, we had them bid the individual improvements separately and then provide a bid for the overall 4 projects. So if you did the math, you'll notice that there is a discount to do all 4 projects, and that by and large is why the department's recommending we go forward with all 4. If we were to break it out and do them a la carte and just pick 1 or 2, we're going to pay a little more. So the difference for Canoyer, I believe, was in the order of 18 grand was the discount if we do all 4 projects, and that does include watering as well. So I'll conclude with that. Steve, do you want to add anything to anything I said? If not, I'll turn it back to any questions from the committee.
With the chair's permission, yes, I would just make just 2 brief comments. The $247,000, I believe, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, I think in the budget for 2022, we only have about $100,000 for these plantings. Am I accurate?
That's correct, yes.
All right, so we don't have enough money in the budget. Now we can make a budget adjustment. We're going into the budget adjustment time right now. We're actually starting that process as we speak. The other thing I just wanted to point out, you all may recall that Mayor Boland came before this committee a couple meetings ago and made a plea for these plantings. This is part of his beautification plan, and he's very interested, and he's really touting the beautification plan, not only west of 109, but also the screenings on 100 for the Brightleaf, as well as 109 for the homes to the east there. And so you all may recall that he did come before the committee and made his point there. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, anyone want to make a motion, or if there's a question? Councilmember Farmer, is that a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, anyone wish to make a second? Councilmember Hopper with the second. All right, so any questions or comments, or otherwise we'll move right into the vote. All right, seeing none. All those in favor say aye of the motion with the recommendation as the Department of Public Works as presented here for the combined projects. All those in favor say aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, that motion then passes. So
Thank you,
now-
committee. First of all, thank you, number one, for you agreeing to this. Secondly, I want to make sure that everybody understands this will be for this fall. We timed this and to get the bids and get it before you all, and then get it before council. And this will be, I guess, on Monday's agenda, Rick?
Yes, this will be on Monday's agenda for the city council.
All right, that's good. That gives us time then to mobilize the landscaping company and get these trees in before the season ends.
All right. Next, then on the agenda is the contractor bids for the 2022 fall tree planting. Rick, I guess that is going to be you.
Yes, sir. Chair Garitano and committee members. Originally intended this item to be for action, but I've kind of changed my stance on it, frankly. I don't know if I told Mr. Cross this either, to be quite honest. We are hoping to plant trees this fall, primarily to replace ash trees that have died. We also had a bid for that work last week. Have a RFP prepared that was put together with the assistance of Davie Resource Group. We advertised it last month and opened bids or asked for bid proposals essentially last Wednesday. Bottom line is we really only got one proposal in hand, and that was from Gamma Tree. They didn't fully respond to it either. We asked for prices for watering, and I think that's what really concerned me the most, was that we weren't sure they were totally clear on the proposal. And the more I talked with Mark at Davie Resource Group last week, we felt we had time to push this a little bit. We intentionally tried to get it out early to give us plenty of time. And I think Mark felt comfortable essentially extending the deadline and trying to see if we could get a few more proposals in hand before we make a decision. So that's really what we're recommending at this point, was to hold off moving forward with a agreement with Gamma Tree to do the fall tree planting. By doing so, I would have something, and the plan would be bring it back to you next month and then take it immediately to City Council in September. We feel pretty comfortable that if we start planning by mid-October, we should be fine, and that's really when we'd want to do it anyway. So I think that's where we're at this point. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. At this time, we did find that the price from, well, I won't divulge it. I can't bring that up. I don't want to divulge the price that we got from Gamma. That would not be correct at this time. All I will say is it was higher than what we had last year from them. But so from that standpoint, it did concern me. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to address them at this time.
All right, any questions for Rick about it? Otherwise, it'll come back. Joe?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Rick. I realized kind of driving around my ward. So a bunch of the trees that we plant look like, I don't know if you guys have the numbers on how many make it and how many don't, but I'm just wondering if maybe outside of this bid process, if we included some type of a letter to, especially the residents, if it's in front of their house, that like it might be in their best interest, or they'd be willing to water it and like make sure it's straight and stuff, because some of these trees are growing at some pretty weird angles now.
Well, certainly we've had a couple thoughts in that regard, frankly, as we try to improve what we're doing going forward. The more we've talked with Davie about our tree planting project, we're going to try to involve the property owners a little more to a greater degree in the future. And we can do that by, right now we are sending postcards to them, and we have sent a tree care postcard to them, but we're going to expand that to include potentially door hangers, and then even putting a sign in their front yard, just a small sign that lets them know what's going on. So essentially improving the degree or improving the communication that we have with those property owners will go a long way. Secondly, we're looking to make sure, even in the residential neighborhoods, that we do have a tree staking requirement included in the proposal. And the smaller trees, I think originally we thought they wouldn't need to be staked, but we found that that's not the case. So we're making sure that they are staked in the future when they do get installed, so that we don't have that problem with them leaning. So we'll hopefully learn from the mistakes and get better moving forward.
Cool.
All right, then we will revisit that next time. So now we're going to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the proposed deer no feed ordinance. So with that, I guess, Councilman Bertolino, is that related to the no feed ordinance?
Yeah, I would propose, given what we are advancing with the with white buffalo and the deer management, it seems a little disingenuous to talk about promoting a no feed ordinance when in fact probably this winter we're going to start feeding the deer to get them accustomed to coming to a place where they're going to be shot. So I think it's disingenuous for us to put this forward like now, but maybe I would say let's table this particular item until we have a full deer management proposal to go to the council.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
if I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Young, with your permission, to come on and explain the no feed ordinance, because there's language in there that, you know, this type of what Councilmember Bertolino just brought up is handled kind of separately in this, and all the municipalities that we talked with have a no feed ordinance on the books in addition to doing their hunting and so forth. But I think it'd be helpful for the committee, I think, if Mr. Young talked about what's in this no feed ordinance as it relates to feeding in your backyard versus, you know, bringing them to a central point to shoot them.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, City Administrator. Members of the committee, the draft ordinance does provide for an express restriction or express exception to the general no feed for circumstances that the City Administrator described, such as a weaning of or controlled kill of white-tailed deer in the city. The general prohibition is just for the express purpose of keeping people from intentionally feeding deer in their backyards and or property they own, and thereby drawing them potentially away from the centralized location that the controlled kill would be drawing them to. So I think everything I've read and everything I understand about the other communities that are doing similar programs in this ordinance is comparable to various other communities in St. Louis County. I think it's part and parcel with the overall approach to deer management in their city. So it's a combination of making sure that people aren't feeding deer so that when there is a controlled kill where centralized feeding is done, it's effective. I'm happy to answer any questions about any other provisions in the bill.
Sorry, hit the wrong button. Councilmember Eden's got her hand up, then Clark, then Bertolino.
I appreciate Attorney Young's comments. That goes in line with what I was going to say. While I appreciate Councilmember Bertolino's comments, I disagree with the idea to table it because this makes White Buffalo's job easier. It makes it more efficient, and it serves the purpose of educating residents on a topic we need them to be educated on going into the deer management process. And it's the first step that we can take that has zero fiscal note. And we also need residents to understand that diseases are passed at licks and at feeding stations as well. So I think Attorney Young said a lot of the reasoning, but I would encourage us to move forward with it. So I would like to amend the language formally under purpose, because I do feel that it really didn't stress disease transmission, not only deer to deer, but person to person enough. Like with tick spreading, I think a lot of people relate to concerns about their kids and themselves with tick-borne diseases, but maybe really don't care about fecal matter as much if they don't think it's a problem that affects them personally. And so if there was a way to stress disease transmission in that language a little bit more, I think it would be appropriate to do so. And if we want to do that by consent or by a motion, I'm happy to provide a motion if that's necessary.
Well, we would probably, we'll do it formally. We'll probably have you just do an amended, that way. But
would you like a motion on the floor to approve it first before an amendment? Does that have to occur first?
Yeah, we still definitely got to get a motion on the floor just for what we have there. And then if you want to amend it, then we can do that.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to put it on the floor.
Okay, so motion to put it on the floor. Is there a second for that motion? And then we're going to go, we still got some hands up. Councilmember Farmer with the second. So, question is this, Councilmember Clark and Bertolino, I think their comments are probably going to be related on the main motion because you just mentioned about the amendment there. So if we put the amendment now, we're only going to be focused on discussion on the amendment. So it's up to you if you want to wait to hear what they say and then make your motion, to amend it, or if you want to do it now.
Either way is fine. They can go ahead, and then
All
if they want to make it while they have the floor, they're fine to do that as well. If not, circle back to me after the two of them.
Okay. Then let's see, Councilmember Clark and Bertolino.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was just in the same line as Councilmember Edens, that under purpose, something that you said, Attorney Young, just kind of hit me as a clarification for people reading this and the purpose. If it said the attracting and intentional feeding, or the intentional attracting and intentional feeding. Intentional kind of puts the exclamation point on the fact that it's not about just if deer come in your yard and eat the flowers, because I have had that comment from some people. Well, how can I not feed the deer? So the word intentional is just a suggestion if it works.
All right, Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, I've just got it, amendment or not, I've got to say I would vote against this again, simply because I'm not opposed to it. I'm just opposed to the timing of it. We're going to be wrestling with the full measure of introducing the euthanasia deer management program from White Buffalo and have public hearings on this. And I think having this other issue coming through prior to that is just going to stir up and muddy the waters a little bit in terms of, it will raise some concerns by residents who we're going to confront and have to talk to about the whole issue. And I just think we don't want to piecemeal it. That's all.
All right, so any other questions or comments on the main motion? Otherwise, we'll entertain that amendment now if you want to make that.
Yep,
Okay.
I'd like to just kind of increase the public health language and animal to animal transmission as well.
Okay, so
I'm sure there's a better way to phrase that Attorney Young will figure out, but the general idea is in the motion.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just as a suggestion, I can add the phrase disease transmission as a general overall statement.
Okay.
It keeps it clean and concise.
all right. So with that, then we've got the language there. So Councilmember Edens is making an amendment to the language there, right? Is there a second for that? Councilmember Farmer? Okay, so Carla, do you have that? I just want to make sure I give you a chance. All right, well, let's do the vote on the amendment then, unless there's any more discussion on that. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain on the
Opposed.
amendment? All right, we got one opposed, so the amendment passes. So now we're back to the main motion. And do we have any discussion on the main motion? Okay, well, maybe I'll opine, and only just really because that way you know where I stand. I support it really too, but I do like the idea of a kind of a comprehensive approach that Councilmember Bertolino mentioned, only because I know some people that actually do feed, not me, but people that put corn out for the and stuff. And I think it's helpful for them to understand it and be a part of the solution when we have these, kind of like open hearing, or when we talk about the deer topic, to understand more. And so, I think, whether it's a delay, but I think it will pass eventually. It's just more of let's kind of put it comprehensively. And I don't know if, the majority feel that way. I just explaining why I would vote along the lines of Councilmember Bertolino. So any other questions or comments? Councilmember Hopper.
I'm going to actually just agree with both you and Councilmember Bertolino that I think it's, I 100% agree with the measure and with, providing this ordinance, but I think it does come across better when it's delivered as part of a total package that we can present to residents, and not, we're going to do this ordinance and then we're going to do this and we're going to do this. I think it's a little easier received when it comes as one total plan of everything that we're doing together to help with deer management, and not as Mr. Bertolino said so well, a piecemeal solution that's kind of thrown out there. So I would also vote in agreement with Mr. Bertolino.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so, okay, we got the motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone oppose?
Opposed.
Okay, I'll oppose with Dave. Anyone else? Yeah, Hopper, you mentioned before. Okay, so let's see, what do we got here? Carla, we had 3 opposes, the rest, and I guess anyone else abstain? Let's make sure we don't have any abstains. Okay, so we'll assume the rest are in favor. So that, I think the in favor, let's see, that would be Edens, Farmer, Clark, Jaxie. So, and then we had 3 opposed. Oh, and Nyan is in favor as well. Sorry, I missed you in the corner. So I think the in favors win on this one here. But again, I think that's it. So Carla, right? Do I have it right? Motion
Yes.
passes. Okay.
Yes, you do.
Okay, motion passes then. All right, so we've got that. So now I'll go to council. And then we have the next item on the agenda, which is the recommended projects for TAP federal funding applications. So Rick, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Chair Giarratano. Committee members, this again was before you previously, so you should be somewhat knowledgeable about the topic. We have the opportunity to apply for federal funding under the Transportation Alternatives Program, which is designed primarily for, or generally for pedestrian and bicycle improvement projects. Our deadline to submit for that this round is August 19th. So tonight I am bringing to you the final information relative to two potential applications this summer. As we discussed previously, one is for Etherton Road. That would be for Etherton Road between Manchester Road up to Canberry Lane. I have made a slight change to my recommendation on that project that you need to be aware of. I picked up on it from my memo. Previously, I was suggesting that we apply for just an 8-foot or a shared use path along the east side of the road. After really looking at that project, we'd always envisioned ultimately adding sidewalks on the opposite side, on the west side. And the length of improvement on the west side to add the sidewalk is fairly minimal, and it seems like it would be a fairly easy thing to accomplish. So instead of leaving that for later, we've changed the recommendation to the committee to include the sidewalk on the west side as well as the path on the east side of the road. So I wanted to make that clear to you. And then the department could entertain the additional roadway improvements potentially as a city project. So the idea would be to get the funding through this grant to provide the sidewalk, the pedestrian and bike accommodations, and then the city would pick up the tab for any remaining improvements on the corridor. So the cost that we've come up with for the Ethelton Road project is about $1,240,000. So we are recommending that we apply for 80% federal funding for the project. So there's two recommendations tonight for you. The first is for the Ethelton Road project that would include the path on the east side, the sidewalk on the west side. The request would be 80% federal funding for that project. So that would entail $248,000 of federal money. There is an application fee of 0.5% or just under $5,000, $4,960. So that is the first recommendation. If you like, I can continue on and talk about the second one, or if you want to break for any questions on this one, I'll take your lead, I guess, at this point. Would you like me to continue on?
I would think just go ahead and continue unless anyone objects.
So the second project is the Green Pines Park Connector Path, and this is the proposed trail that would connect to Green Pines Park, which was more recently constructed at the end of Pond Grover Parkway. I guess I call it the south end, and it would connect a 10-foot path over to the villages at Brightleaf. Within that subdivision, there is a trail that was constructed in dead ends, and it was always the intent at some point to connect that through. So now that the park is constructed, the idea would be to connect the park to that trail segment that's been built in the villages at Brightleaf subdivision. This project is about 1,300 feet in length. We're proposing to construct the trail at a cost of about $267,000. If I didn't misspeak there, but the cost of that project overall is $267,000. That is our estimate. So the second recommendation would be to pursue a funding application for the Green Pines Park Connector Path. We would also request for 80% federal funding on that project as well. So we'd be asking for about $213,600. There would be an application fee again of 0.5% for that project. That's only about $1,068. So if I didn't misspeak there. So the 20% local match on this one would be only $53,400. So again, the two projects would be the Ethelton Road project and the Green Pines Park Connector Path that we're recommending to you tonight. If the recommendation is approved, we will move forward with resolutions for the approval of the City Council at your meeting on Monday night. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
All right, any questions or motion? Councilmember Hopper, is your hand up for this?
No, my apologies. I was still up from before. Forgot to take it down.
Okay, anyone want to make a motion for this? Councilmember Farmer, second by Councilmember Nyan. This is the motion with the department's recommendation for submittal of the applications. Any questions, comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, the motion passes. We are down to last item on the agenda that we have under for action. So the Community Forestry Cost Share Grant. Rick.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to make this brief if possible. I know it's been a long meeting. So earlier this month, our consultant with Davie Resource Group, Mark, submitted a grant application to the Missouri Department of Conservation on our behalf. And the grant was submitted under what was formerly known as the TRIM grant program, which we've received almost every year for many years through the department. They've renamed the program this year. It's called the Community Forestry Cost Share Program. So the grant that we requested funds for is to finalize our citywide inventory of street trees. And you might recall, we started this process earlier this year. And at that time, we were utilizing a trim grant that we received last year in 2021. So that work was done, but we found out that as a result of being out there, we found out we have a lot more potential locations for trees than we had any idea. Unfortunately, we got essentially halfway through the city streets and realized we have a lot more work to do, unfortunately. So what we thought was going to be an effort that we would get done in relatively short order is much longer than we originally thought. And if we thought originally we had about 6,000 trees and vacant sites, we're probably closer to 12,000 at this point. So the bottom line is we were looking for more money to complete the second half of the tree inventory, the citywide tree inventory. So Davey did put in another trim grant or a community forestry cost share grant application for us with the MDC. They got that in right away when they announced the program for this year, and they quickly turned around and approved it much more quickly than I expected. So essentially to finish the streetwide or the citywide inventory of street trees, we'd like to go forward with this additional MDC grant through the Community Forestry Cost Share Program. The amount of money that is going to be awarded to us is $16,425. The program does require a 25% match, so our share of that would be $5,475. So recommendation to the committee tonight is to move forward with the approval of an agreement to move forward with the execution of the Community Forestry Cost Share Agreement with the MDC. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions that you may have.
All right, any questions? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Hopper, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
I will make the motion.
All right, making a motion based on the recommendation there, second by Councilmember Clark. Anything else before we vote? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, the motion passes. With that, we have concluded all the 4 action items, so that there are several items that will be targeted for the September agenda. You'll see those listed there. Anything under miscellaneous from anyone? Okay, next meeting Tuesday, September 6th, and we plan to get back in person again. So Teresa, plan some baking for us because we miss your cookies or brownies or whatever you can think of. So with that, then I'll take a motion for adjournment, and thanks again for everything tonight. Made by Councilmember Hopper, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everyone. Take care.